Hey guy. If your day has been loud, let it fade for a few minutes. Drop your shoulders and breathe slowly. Picture this in present tense. Dry hills under a late sun, time and dust under your steps, and Mycenae on its ridge, stone piled into a crown the earth refuses to remove. The wind tastes of olive leaf. The light turns boulders gold, then slips away. Cheeky reality check. You probably won't survive this with your thoughts still racing. Ancient places have a quiet talent for slowing you down. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been, your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now turn off the lights. Take a deep, slow breath. Let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. You walk. Your thoughts fall into step with your feet. The path climbs through brittle grass and scattered stones. Cicadas keep their soft, endless buzz, and the sound starts to feel less like noise and more like a blanket. Warmth lingers in the ground from the afternoon sun, and each time your foot presses down you feel that stored heat answer back. A stray herb snaps under your sole and releases a clean, sharp scent, the kind that makes your brain briefly go quiet just to notice it. Behind you, the plain spreads out in muted colors, dusty gold, dull green, and a thin bright line of distant water. A few olive trees stand like dark commas in the heat, and when the wind flips their leaves you catch quick flashes of silver. Mycenae doesn't do subtle once it decides to appear. The first stones you see are enormous, irregular masses stacked with stubborn confidence. You drift closer and brush your fingertips against the rock. The surface is rough, sun-warmed on the outside and secretly cool beneath, like the wall is storing night inside itself. You feel grit under your fingertips, and the tiny roughness steadies you. A few locals move along the approach with calm purpose, baskets, cords, tools, the simple necessities of daily life. Their cloth is practical, sun-faded, worn soft in the places it needs to be. They pass without fuss, and you feel the kind of welcome that doesn't perform. You're allowed to be here as long as you don't disrupt the rhythm. The approach funnels inward, and your body adjusts automatically. You step quieter. You hold your elbows closer. Your breath lowers, like the air itself is cooler and slightly more valuable. The wall to one side rises close enough that it shapes your route, guiding you toward a single point of entry. Then the Lion Gate comes fully into view, and even your sleepy brain pauses. Two lions rear up on either side of a central pillar, their bodies carved into a posture that doesn't require faces to do its job. Their heads are missing, long gone, and the absence makes them stranger. No expression to read, no eyes to meet, only the solid fact of guardianship. Above them, the triangular gap in the masonry sits like a clever breath, easing the weight. Beneath that, the lintel lies across the doorway as one massive stone, a statement of what this place can carry. You step up to the threshold, and the air shifts. Outside is sun and wind and open space. Inside is shade, cooler, quieter, held. Crossing it feels like stepping from one mood into another. Your skin notices first. Your mind follows. You pass beneath the lions. stone changes the sound of your feet. The world behind you becomes a framed slice of hillside and evening air. The world ahead becomes a controlled curve of passage, a ramp that turns slightly as it rises. It's defensive design, sure, but it also works on you in a gentler way. It prevents you from barging in. It teaches you to enter like a guest, to let the citadel set the pace. Along the inner wall, you notice small human traces, scuffs where countless saws have brushed the same stone, dust gathered in corners that the wind can't reach, a crack where a stubborn little plant has pushed through. Deeper inside, smoke hangs faintly in the air, olive wood, domestic, steady. Somewhere, bread exists as a scent before it exists as a sight, and your body recognizes it as comfort without needing proof. For a moment you stand there, half in shade, half in the memory of sun, letting the threshold do its work. Mycenae doesn't ask you to understand it yet. It only asks you to keep moving, quietly, into its layered interior, toward courtyards and storerooms, toward careful records and patient crafts, toward hidden water, honeyed echoes, and a final warm glint of royal gold. You take one slow breath in. You let it out softer. And you start up the ramp, letting the Lion Gate settle behind you like the first page of a dream you're finally willing to read. You keep moving upward, and it feels less like climbing and more like being guided by the architecture itself, the way a river guides a leaf. The path bends in that deliberate, defensive curve, and your body accepts the instruction without protest. It's funny how quickly you stop arguing with a place that was designed to outlast arguments. On your left, the wall rises close enough that you could reach out and touch it. You do, because you're human, and humans have always been ridiculous about touching old things. The stone is warm on the surface, sun-fed, but beneath that warmth there's a deeper coolness, as if the wall is storing night inside itself. Your fingertips skim the rough face of a boulder and catch on tiny grains, irregularities, the stubborn texture of a world that doesn't care about being smooth for you. Cyclopean, they call this style later, because the stones are so large that people decide only a one-eyed giant could have built them. And you get it. You really do. One block bulges outward like a shoulder. Another has an edge that looks bitten, jagged, but still fitted so snugly against its neighbor that the seam disappears into shadow. There's no neat symmetry to admire. It's more intimate than that, like a puzzle solved by someone with brute patience and a strong sense of what good enough means when you're building a fortress. You walk past a section where the stones are especially massive, and your mind tries to measure them with modern logic. How many people? How many ropes? How many days? But the questions don't land cleanly here. Mycenae doesn't answer with numbers. It answers with presence. The walls are the answer. They exist, therefore the labor happened, therefore the will existed, therefore the fear existed, therefore the ambition existed. You can feel the chain of cause and effect like a faint vibration in your ribs. Ahead, the entrance behind you is now a framed slice of daylight, and you realize how the path has already positioned you. You can't easily look back and see everything at once. You can't keep the outside world in full view. That's intentional, of course, but it also has this gentler side effect. It invites your mind to stop multitasking. It narrows your attention. It softens the mental noise. You're not thinking about your inbox now. You're thinking about stone, about sky, about the way your breath sounds when you're trying not to disturb a place. A few people move along the same ramp, and their steps fall into the rhythm of yours without effort. One carries a shallow tray of something that smells faintly of salt and herbs. Maybe small fish, maybe olives, maybe both, because people in this region have always been good at turning simple things into pleasure. Another has a coil of rope looped over one shoulder, the rope worn soft from use. Their movements are unhurried but purposeful, like they have learned that panic wastes energy. You file that away as a quiet lesson. Panic is expensive. Calm is efficient. The wall on your left is pocked with tiny hollows where rainwater has once rested, where wind has worried the surface, where time has left its fingerprints. You think about how many hands have touched these stones for comfort, for superstition, for work. A mason smoothing a fit. A guard leaning in the shade. A child pressing a palm against the wall just to feel the warmth. You imagine the wall remembering all of it, not in words, but in that slow accumulation of contact. You pass a narrow spot where the ramp tightens, and your shoulder almost brushes the stone. The space asks you to move single file, to compress. The wall does what walls do. It controls bodies. But there's no cruelty in it, not right now. The effect is almost calming. Containment can be soothing when you're tired. When your thoughts feel like scattered birds, it's not the worst thing to be guided by a corridor of ancient rock. Above you, the sky is a hard, clean blue, bleached by sun. The light makes sharp edges sharper. It turns every pebble into a small, bright statement. And yet, inside the citadel's approach, the light is constantly broken, by the wall's height, by its angles, by the curve of the path. Shade arrives in strips, then vanishes. Your eyes adjust. Your mind adjusts. You become patient with the changing brightness, the way you become patient with someone who has lived longer than you. A scent drifts down from within the citadel, smoke, yes, but also something sweet and resinous. Maybe pine. Maybe burning olive pits. It threads through the air like a promise of human life deeper inside. Mycenae is not only stone. It is also breath, fire, food, sweat, wool, clay. The walls may be the famous part, but the walls exist because of what they protect, the people and their systems, their storerooms, their rituals, their leaders, their dead. And you, sleep soft, curious, are being allowed to approach the center of all that. You notice a small niche in the wall, a pocket where someone has wedged a broken shard of pottery, maybe intentionally, maybe absent-mindedly. It catches light for a second, a pale curve, then you pass it. You think about how even in a fortress, broken things exist and get reused. Nothing is wasted if you can help it. The idea is oddly comforting. Even your own broken bits, your exhaustion, your scattered focus, might be useful in some other form. The ramp continues to lift you, and your legs feel the gentle effort. Not painful, just present. Each step is a small, honest thing. You feel your heartbeat steady, your breath deepening. There's a kind of quiet pleasure in moving your body through a landscape that doesn't demand performance. No one is timing you. No one is applauding. You're just walking, and the citadel is just being itself, and that is enough. A man passes you, carrying a bundle of thin wooden poles, maybe for building, maybe for weaving frames, maybe for something you won't understand yet. His face is calm, his eyes trained on the path, not on you. He gives you the briefest glance, the way you might glance at a cloud that looks interesting but doesn't require action. You realize, again, that your presence here is not the main event. You are not the center of the world. Mycenae is. And somehow, that takes pressure off your chest. The wall begins to open its view in small increments. Through a gap, you catch a glimpse of the interior, more stone, terraces, hints of structures higher up. Nothing fully revealed, just enough to make your mind lean forward. It's like the place is pacing your curiosity, keeping you from consuming it too quickly. Even your wonder has to walk at the speed of the ramp. You pause for a moment, not because you're tired, but because your attention catches on the way two stones meet. One bulges, the other dips, and they lock together like teeth. There's no mortar, no soft filler. Just weight and fit and gravity doing their ancient job. You think about trust. Not emotional trust, not the kind that gets you into trouble at 2 a.m. with the wrong person. Structural trust. The kind where you put one massive thing against another massive thing and believe the world will hold. It's a blunt philosophy, but it works. You keep going, and the ramp begins to feel less like a defensive corridor and more like a ceremonial approach, an ascent designed not only to frustrate attackers but to shape the mindset of anyone entering. By the time you reach the top, you are already changed. Slower, smaller, more attentive. That's the real function of the walls, not just protection, but transformation. And somewhere ahead, beyond the curve, the citadel's heart waits, courtyards and smoke and human movement, while behind you, the Lion Gate becomes a memory in your spine, and these cyclopean stones become the steady hand guiding you deeper into the dream. The ramp finally relaxes its grip on you, and the space widens the way a clenched hand opens, slowly, almost reluctantly, as if it's making sure you're ready before it gives you room. You step out of the corridor of wall shadow and into a broader interior breath, where light falls more freely and the air carries a richer mix of scents, smoke, crushed olive leaves, warm grain, something tangy like fermenting wineskins tucked away in a cool corner. Your eyes take a moment to settle, because the citadel isn't a single neat scene. It's layers, terraces, paths that curve and climb again, stone steps worn into soft concavity by countless saws, walls within walls, spaces that feel functional first, impressive second. Mycenae isn't trying to be pretty for you. It's trying to work, to endure, to keep the center of itself intact. And yet, beauty shows up anyway, because beauty always leaks into human places. It's in the way sunlight flashes off a shard of pottery half buried near a threshold. It's in the pale dust that lifts when someone passes and then settles like a tiny blessing. It's in the rhythm of movement, people crossing the open area with baskets, bundles, tools, bodies that know where they're going, hands that do tasks without drama. You drift into what feels like the citadel's communal pulse, an open courtyard space, not grand in a modern marble plaza way, but alive in a practical way. The ground is packed earth and stone, scuffed and stained with ash. There are darker patches where something spilled and dried. A faint ring where a fire pit has been used again and again, its stones blackened at the edges. The air is not quiet here, but it's not loud either, more like a soft weave of sounds, footsteps, the scrape of a bowl against stone, the low murmur of work, the occasional sharp call from far enough away that it becomes part of the general atmosphere rather than words you need to understand. No one stops you. No one interrogates you. You're simply absorbed. a small new thread in the tapestry. A woman kneels near a shallow basin, rinsing something, greens, maybe, or wool being cleaned before it's spun. Water catches light and throws it back in small, bright flickers. Nearby, a child crouches and draws lines in dust with a stick, making shapes that don't mean anything to anyone except him, which is the purest kind of art. Another person passes with a clay jar hugged to the chest, careful, steady, the jar's rounded belly shining faintly with burnished slip. You notice the way people greet each other, not with dramatic embraces, not with performative warmth, but with the smallest gestures, a tilt of the head, a shift of the shoulders to make space, a hand briefly touching another arm as if to say, "Yes, I see you, keep going." It's efficient kindness. The kind that doesn't ask for applause. The smell of bread intensifies, and you follow it like an obedient animal. Somewhere nearby, someone has tended a small oven, clay and stone, heat held in a compact chamber. A flat loaf emerges, pale gold with darker blisters, steam rising in thin threads. You don't need anyone to hand it to you for your mouth to imagine it. The crisp edge, the soft interior, the faint bitterness of grain, the sweetness of heat. Your body reacts as if you've been hungry for longer than you realized. And this is where you begin to understand something simple and important. The citadel is not only a fortress. It's a home with very strong opinions about survival. You move through the courtyard slowly, letting details land. Here, a pile of kindling arranged with care, because fire is not a casual thing when everything depends on it. There, a cluster of amphorae resting in shade, their mouths covered, their bellies cool, holding oil or wine or grain, wealth that looks like ordinary storage until you remember that stored food is stored time. In one corner, a low workbench where someone has left a stone tool and a scrap of leather, mid-task, trusting they can return without it being stolen. That kind of trust is its own luxury. A man sits near the edge of the open space, repairing a strap, leather pulled through fingers, tightened, tested. His movements are practiced, economical. He doesn't look up in that dramatic, "Welcome, stranger," way. He simply exists in your peripheral vision as a reminder that every shining legend rests on a mountain of small repairs. You catch sight of olive branches stacked neatly, leaves silvery green, their scent sharp when crushed. Olives are everywhere here, not only as food but as oil, as light, as medicine, as offering. The olive tree is a quiet ruler of the region, and you feel its presence in the way the air carries a faint bitterness, the way people's hands glisten slightly, the way lamps are filled, the way skin is soothed. You imagine someone rubbing oil onto tired arms at night, not as luxury, but as basic care. You think briefly about your own tiredness, and how little oil you give yourself, how rarely you soften your own edges. The courtyard slopes slightly, and beyond it you glimpse higher terraces where structures rise, more enclosed spaces, more controlled access. You feel the citadel's hierarchy in the way the ground itself organizes people. Lower spaces where many move freely. Higher spaces where movement narrows. You don't need a sign that says, "Power this way." The architecture whispers it with every step. Still, for now, you remain among the everyday. And the everyday here has its own sacredness. Someone is grinding grain, stone against stone, a steady rasping sound that could lull you to sleep if it weren't also so full of effort. The person's shoulders move in a slow rhythm, breath timed to the push and pull. Flour dust clings to fingertips. It looks almost like pale gold in the light. You find yourself thinking about how many hands have done exactly this motion, day after day, year after year, because bread is not a trend. It's a vow. Nearby, a shallow bowl holds something dark, maybe dried herbs, maybe crushed pigment. A splash of red earth in another dish. Yellow like sunlight trapped in powder. For a moment your mind flickers to images, painted walls, patterned textiles, because humans don't just survive, they decorate survival. They insist on beauty even when stone walls loom. A breeze moves through, and with it comes a faint metallic tang, bronze being worked somewhere deeper inside. You don't see the workshop yet, but your body registers the smell, hot metal, soot, sweat. It's the scent of tools, of weapons, of hinges, needles, and blades that turn a community from fragile to capable. Mycenae is built of stone, but it's also built of bronze and fiber and fire. You take another slow breath, and the courtyard air fills your lungs like warm cloth. In this open space, you feel the first true welcome, not spoken, not announced, but enacted. People step around you without irritation. They allow you to find your pace. A path opens when you drift too close to a busy area, and you instinctively step aside. It's a quiet negotiation of space, a shared understanding, don't disrupt, and you can stay. Your senses soften. The hard edges of your day, screens, deadlines, sharp lights, fade behind the citadel's textured calm. Your mind begins to move at the speed of hands, at the speed of bread rising, at the speed of ash cooling, at the speed of olive oil settling into a lamp. And as you stand there, letting the courtyard teach you how to be human again, slow, attentive, ordinary, you feel the pull upward, toward the higher terraces where authority lives. Not because you crave power, but because the citadel is designed like a story. You start at the gate, you pass the walls, you enter the communal heart, and then, inevitably, you are drawn toward the center. So you let the courtyard release you. You turn, following a path that climbs gently, and you carry the courtyard smells with you, ash and olive and bread, like a soft cloak over your shoulders as you move toward the shadowed presence of the palace, where order waits without needing to introduce itself. You climb again, but now the ascent feels different. The ramp outside had a defensive tightness. The courtyard had a communal looseness. This path, this subtle rise toward the palace center, has a quiet gravity, the kind that doesn't shove you, just tilts the world so you naturally roll where it wants you. The ground changes under your feet. More stone laid with intention. Steps that feel measured, as if someone long ago decided the exact height that would keep you steady but slightly aware of your own body. And that awareness matters here. In places like this, posture is part of the architecture. You notice it in the way people move. The closer you get to the palace core, the fewer careless gestures you see. People still carry baskets, still walk with purpose, still do ordinary work, but there's a refinement to their paths. A slight narrowing of their routes, as if invisible lines are drawn on the ground and everyone has learned not to step across them unless they belong there. You have never been taught the rules, and yet your body begins to guess them correctly, which is both impressive and faintly alarming. Humans are very good at reading power. It's one of our least restful talents. The structures here rise in stronger shapes, walls more upright, surfaces more finished. You see plastered areas, pale and sunlit, with faint traces of pigment where paint has once held patterns. Even when color has faded, the intention lingers. Someone wanted this place not only to function, but to look like it functions for important people. You catch a glimpse of a column base, smooth stone, rounded, a little elegant compared to the rough boulders of the outer walls. The citadel speaks in accents, rough at the edges, polished at the center. A doorway opens into a shaded interior, and you feel cool air breathe out like an animal exhaling. Inside, the light becomes softer, controlled. The air smells less of courtyard smoke and more of stored things. Oil, grain, wool, cedar, maybe. Not perfumed luxury, but an organized scent, the smell of resources being kept safe. Wealth has a smell, and it's usually less glamorous than people imagine. It smells like inventory. You don't rush inside. You hover near the threshold, the way you hover near someone's private room when you're not sure you're invited. And in that hovering, you start to notice how authority is communicated without a single spoken command. It's in the thresholds themselves, some wide, some narrow, some positioned so you must turn slightly as you enter, making you present your side, not your full front, an old defensive habit disguised as etiquette. It's in the way certain routes are clear and swept, while others are cluttered, subtly discouraging you from wandering. It's in the placement of benches, jars, posts, objects that look practical but also act like soft barriers. The palace doesn't need guards barking orders at you. It has furniture. It has layout. It has the quiet confidence of design. A person passes near you carrying something small but careful, perhaps a sealed tablet, perhaps a bundle of cords, perhaps an item wrapped in cloth. Their pace is controlled, their gaze forward, their hands steady. You feel, without being told, that this object matters. And you feel, without being threatened, that you should not get in their way. So you don't. You step aside with a calm that surprises you, and the path continues without disruption. Power loves smoothness. It hates friction. You glance around and realize that even the silence here is different. In the courtyard, sound scattered and blended. Here, sound is absorbed. Walls hold it. Roof spaces muffle it. Footsteps become soft, respectful. You can almost hear your own breath more clearly, and it makes you want to breathe quietly, which is absurd because breathing is not disrespect. But your body doesn't care about logic. It cares about atmosphere. In the palace core, you become aware of how many lives orbit around a central figure you cannot yet see. The Wanax, the king, the ruler, might be somewhere within these rooms, or might not be present at all, but his influence is in the shape of everything. It's like gravity, invisible, undeniable, and very rude when you try to ignore it. Even people who don't like him still have to walk under his rules, and the rules have a way of embedding themselves into stone. You move along a corridor where the plaster is smoother, and you spot marks, faint incisions, little scratched symbols, maybe the casual record of a worker, maybe a sign someone made while waiting. It reminds you that even in a place of hierarchy, humans leave fingerprints. Someone leaned here. Someone carried something too heavy through this doorway and scuffed the edge. Someone, at some point, was tired and did not care that the palace is important. That thought comforts you. Importance is fragile. Tiredness is universal. A small cluster of storage jars rests near a wall, their bellies round, their mouths sealed. You notice how they're positioned, not randomly, but grouped, counted, arranged. A thin cord loops around one, tagged with a mark. You think of scribes, those quiet keepers of lines and symbols, and you realize this palace is not only a home for rulers. It's a machine for managing people, grain, oil, wool, metal, labor. The palace is an engine, and the Wanax is not only a person, he is a role that keeps the engine's rhythm. When the engine runs smoothly, the citadel eats and trades and survives. When it stutters, people feel it in their bellies. You pass an open area where light falls in a broad pool, and you can almost imagine it filled with movement, rituals, inspections, offerings, guests. Because palace spaces are designed to be seen in. Even if no ceremony is happening now, the room has the posture of ceremony. The walls seem to wait. The floor seems to anticipate footsteps that carry more weight than yours. And you, outsider, drift at the edge of all this, learning the rules by watching. You notice how certain individuals wear slightly finer cloth, still simple, but cleaner, better spun, dyed more evenly. Their hair might be tied with a more intentional cord. Their hands might be less stained with ash. Nothing exaggerated, nothing sparkling. Power here is subtle because it doesn't need to shout. It's a hierarchy written in texture and access. Who gets to walk where? Who gets to linger? Who gets shade first when the sun is merciless? Your mind, half lulling itself into sleep, begins to see how the palace teaches obedience without violence. It teaches through pattern, through repetition, through the small social friction of standing in the wrong place. You can feel it in your own body, how you naturally keep to the side, how you slow down, how you avoid crossing certain thresholds. You are being trained, gently, by architecture and custom. No one has to glare at you. The space does the glaring. And yet, within this controlled world, there are still soft human moments. You catch sight of someone adjusting another's cloak tie, a quick, practical gesture. A person pauses to set down a load carefully rather than dropping it. Someone wipes dust from a jar's rim with the corner of their sleeve. These are not acts of power. They are acts of care. Even inside the Wanax's shadow, people remain people. You realize something else. The palace center doesn't feel cruel. It feels focused. Like the mind of someone who has decided what matters and has arranged the world accordingly. That can be dangerous, yes. But it can also be stabilizing. In a landscape of raids, drought, uncertain harvests, the promise of order can feel like relief. You stand for a moment in that pool of light, letting the palace's quiet authority settle around you like a heavy cloak. You don't resist it. Resisting would require more energy than you have, and also, honestly, you're here to drift, not to start a rebellion in your pajamas. Instead, you let your curiosity move you sideways, toward a more practical kind of power, the storerooms. Because if you want to understand a kingdom, you don't start with crowns. You start with jars. You start with what people save. You start with what they count. So you follow the subtle pull of scent and shade, away from the ceremonial posture and toward the sealed bellies of abundance, where honey, oil, grain, and quiet wealth wait in darkness, humming with the promise of survival. You slip into the cooler belly of the palace, and the air changes again, thicker, calmer, scented with stored life. Outside, the courtyard smelled like fire and movement. Here, it smells like patience, like oil settling in clay, like grain resting in darkness, like honey remembering flowers. The passage narrows, and the light becomes more deliberate, falling in small rectangles through openings that feel intentionally stingy. Mycenae doesn't waste illumination on its secrets. Your eyes adjust, and when they do, you find yourself facing rows of amphorae, tall jars, round-bellied, their surfaces burnished and scratched, some marked with simple signs. They stand in clusters like silent, obedient animals, each one holding a portion of the citadel's future. You walk slowly, because one wrong step here could mean a shattered jar, a spill that would smell sweet for weeks and make everyone quietly furious. And you don't want to be the stranger who breaks the kingdom's dinner. That would be a deeply embarrassing legacy. The floor is cooler beneath your feet, stone shaded from sun. Your breath fogs slightly into your imagination, not because it's truly cold, but because the air has that cellar quality, still, reserved, protected. You hear less here. The sounds of the courtyard fade into a distant murmur. What remains is the smallest noise, a soft scrape of your sandal, the faint tap of your heartbeat behind your ribs. The storerooms make you aware of your own body in a hushed, reverent way, like entering a temple where the god is survival. A person moves nearby, checking seals, clay stoppers pressed into jar mouths, cords tied, tags attached. Their hands are practiced, careful. They don't rush, because rushing causes mistakes, and mistakes here don't just cost pride, they cost meals. You watch the way they touch each seal as if listening through their fingertips. The storerooms are not passive storage. They are constantly monitored, maintained, protected from moisture, pests, theft, careless hands. And suddenly you understand, wealth is not only what you have. Wealth is what you can keep. You pass a cluster of jars that smell faintly of olive oil, even through their sealed mouths, green and golden in your mind, thick liquid that will become food, light, skincare, offering. Oil is everything here. It slicks the gears of daily life. It feeds bodies and flames. It makes bread feel like celebration. It softens cracked hands. It is practical luxury, the kind that doesn't announce itself but improves every hour. Farther along, a sweet scent threads through the air, honey. Not the thin, supermarket honey that tastes vaguely like regret. This is dark, floral, complex, gathered with risk and patience. You imagine honeycomb lifted from hives, bees irritated, smoke used gently to calm them. You imagine the way honey glows in a bowl, the way it clings to fingers, the way it turns plain grain into something comforting. Honey is stored sunlight, and in the storerooms it feels like a promise. Even if the world outside is harsh, sweetness exists, measured and protected. The jars are not random. They're arranged in systems, grouped by content, by destination, by who controls them. Some sit closer to passages, ready for use. Others are deeper in, saved, guarded. The organization is a language. You can't read all of it, but you can feel its intent. Nothing here is casual. Every jar represents labor, someone tending trees, harvesting olives, pressing them. Someone carrying jars. Someone firing clay. Someone sealing mouths. Someone recording quantities. A whole chain of effort condensed into a single belly of storage. You see stacks of grain in woven baskets and bins, the kernels dry and pale, smelling faintly of earth. Grain is not romantic, but it is the real gold. Without it, the palace has no authority, because authority cannot be eaten. Grain can. Grain turns into bread, and bread turns into loyalty, or at least into quiet compliance. A well-fed community is easier to govern. A starving one becomes unpredictable. The Wanax's shadow you felt earlier? It is partly cast by these piles of grain. You catch sight of small bundles tied with cord, wool, maybe, or textiles, or dried herbs. You realize the storerooms hold more than food. They hold materials that become trade, clothing, tools status. Wool is wealth too, spun into thread, woven into cloth, dyed, distributed. The palace isn't only a physical center, it's an economic center, a place where goods flow in and out like blood through a heart. Your mind begins to picture the wider network: farmers on the plain, shepherds in the hills, workers in workshops. Goods arriving through the Lion Gate, passing under those headless lions, becoming part of this ordered interior. And you imagine the palace sending goods outward again, payments, rations, gifts, offerings, keeping the entire system balanced, like a person carefully moving stones in a pile so it doesn't collapse. A small problem flickers through your thoughts, not yet a full story, just a sensation. Systems like this are powerful, but they're also vulnerable. One cracked jar, one damp corner, one careless spark, one missing seal, and the whole place could feel it. You move deeper, and your fingertips hover near a jar's side without touching. The clay is cool, slightly damp to the imagination, and you notice scratches, marks made by handling, by transport, by time. These jars have traveled. They have been rolled, carried, jostled. They've lived a rough life so the people inside the walls can live a steadier one. You come to a spot where the ceiling feels lower, where the air is darkest, and you can almost sense the most precious reserves being kept, things used only for the palace's highest needs, or for emergencies. This is where the citadel's quiet paranoia lives, and honestly, it's not entirely unreasonable. Mycenae sits strong, but the world beyond the walls is not gentle. Raiders exist. Drought exists. Political shifts exist. Even within the walls, envy exists. The storerooms are an attempt to take an unpredictable world and pin it down with clay and cord. You notice one jar with a seal that looks slightly different, maybe newer, maybe repaired. The thought lands softly. Everything here requires maintenance. Nothing stays safe by itself. Someone always has to notice the small changes before they become disasters. That's when you realize the storerooms are also a lesson for you, personally, in the most bedtime way possible. Because you, too, have storerooms, places you keep your energy, your patience, your sweetness. Some of your jars are sealed tight, saved for later, and some are cracked and leaking because you've been carrying too much for too long. The citadel isn't judging you. It's just showing you. Quietly. A worker passes again, checking tags, adjusting a cord, smoothing a clay stopper with a thumb. The motion is tender in its practicality. You watch, and your mind slows further, sinking with a careful pace. There is something soothing about being near people who treat abundance like responsibility rather than entitlement. You drift toward an exit where light grows slightly stronger, where the air warms again. As you leave, the storerooms remain behind you, sealed and humming, like a chest filled with the kingdom's heartbeat. You feel a strange gratitude for jars and grain and honey, not because they're glamorous, but because they make life possible. And as you step back toward the brighter interior spaces, you sense that the next layer of this system is waiting. The people who turn all this stored wealth into numbers, marks, records. The quiet minds who keep the palace's engine honest. You follow that pull, still slow, still held, letting the last sweetness of honey linger in your breath as you drift toward the scribe's world of lines and symbols. You follow the current of the palace inward, away from the sweet, sealed hush of jars and toward a different kind of storage, one that doesn't hold grain or oil, but holds decisions. The air warms a little as you step back into corridors touched by light, and the smell changes again. Less honey and cool clay, more dust, plaster, and that faint mineral scent of damp earth being worked. Somewhere nearby, you sense a quieter rhythm than grinding stones or clinking tools. It's the rhythm of thinking. You come to a room, or a cluster of spaces, that feels strangely calm, like a corner of the citadel where sound is asked to sit down and behave. The light here is steady, not dramatic. A small opening lets sun fall across a low surface where clay sits in lumps, covered with damp cloth to keep it workable. Nearby, thin styluses, bone or reed, rest like delicate weapons, the kind that don't cut skin but can rearrange lives. And here they are, the scribes. Not robed mystics, not theatrical geniuses, not the kind of people who monologue about destiny. They look practical. Clean hands when they can manage it. Focused eyes. Bodies that know how to sit for long stretches without collapsing into a dramatic puddle of complaints. They move with economy, like every gesture is a small cost and they prefer not to overspend. You hover at the edge of their work, and you feel the same thing you felt under the Lion Gate, an instinct to lower your presence. Not because you're in danger, but because you're near something powerful. In Mycenae, power isn't only in bronze or stone. It's in records, in lists, in who gets what, when, and why. A scribe presses a fresh tablet, soft clay flattened into a small rectangle, then holds it steady and begins marking it. The stylus touches clay with a faint, satisfying scratch. Not ink, not paint. Pressure. Indentation. The writing is a series of neat, angular signs, syllables and symbols, paired with small ideograms that stand for commodities and things the palace cares about: oil, grain, wool, maybe livestock. You can't read it, but you can feel its intent, order. Accounting. A kind of quiet spell cast over chaos. This is the palace's other bloodstream. You drift closer, and you notice how the tablets are handled. Fresh ones are moist, vulnerable. Older ones sit drying, hardening into something that can last, at least for a while. Some are larger, some smaller, depending on what they record. A few clay ceilings, little lumps pressed with a signet, sit nearby, like punctuation marks made of authority. The palace doesn't only trust memory. It trusts impressions in clay. Your mind, already softening toward sleep, finds a strange comfort in it. Because lists are reassuring, aren't they? They say, someone noticed. Someone counted. Someone tried to keep the world from unraveling. You see a scribe pause, tilt a tablet, and run a fingertip lightly along an edge, checking spacing, checking the line, checking that the clay hasn't cracked. Another person brings a small container of water to keep clay from drying too fast. The work is careful, attentive, almost tender. People often imagine bureaucracy as cold. Here it feels intimate. These marks decide who eats, who works, who receives wool, who gets oil for lamps, who gets rationed grain when the harvest is uncertain. A kingdom can be held together by a wall, but it can also be held together by a ledger. You catch the faintest glimpse of a pattern, repeated signs, repeated numbers, repeated commodity marks. It's the language of administration. The palace is not only a home for rulers, it's a warehouse of obligations. And because you're you, sleepy, curious, lightly sarcastic, you can't help thinking that the entire heroic world of kings and gold is, under the surface, a glorified spreadsheet made of mud. Which is both hilarious and deeply human. A scribe reaches for a tablet, and their sleeve brushes it, too lightly to be dramatic, but enough to smudge the soft clay at one corner. The marks blur, not ruined, but threatened. The scribe stills for a second, that tiny pause where you can feel annoyance trying to rise and then being politely strangled by professionalism. No one scolds. No one panics. But you sense the pressure in the room shift, the way it shifts when a small mistake might ripple outward. This is where the palace's calm becomes fragile. You don't speak, because there is no dialogue in this dream, and also because you know better than to fling words into a room full of concentration. Instead, you do the most helpful thing a visitor can do. You become useful without being loud about it. You spot a smooth stone tool used for flattening clay, and you slide it gently closer to where it's needed, nudging it into reach like you're offering a quiet apology for existence. You notice a damp cloth slipping from a clay lump, and you adjust it, keeping the material workable. You move a drying tablet slightly farther from a draft so it won't crack at the edges. Small acts. Tiny corrections. The kind of help that doesn't interrupt the flow. The smudged corner becomes manageable. The scribe lightly represses the affected marks, reshaping the indentation while the clay is still forgiving. It's not perfect, but perfection was never the goal. Clarity is the goal. Function. The tablet will still do what it needs to do, preserve information long enough for the palace to act on it. And just like that, the tension dissolves back into quiet. You watch as tablets are stacked, not piled carelessly, but arranged with space, with airflow, with attention. You realize something else. Most of these records are not meant to last forever. They are meant to last long enough. Long enough for rations to be distributed. Long enough for wool to be accounted for. Long enough for a shipment of oil to be promised and then delivered. The clay is temporary, like so many human systems. And yet, some tablets will last longer than anyone intends. Hardened by accident, by heat, by fire, by catastrophe that turns soft clay into durable ceramic. Your sleepy mind holds that thought gently, not as dread, but as a strange kind of fate. Sometimes what survives history is what was never meant to be permanent. A list becomes an artifact. A ration record becomes a voice across millennia. You let that settle in you like a slow breath. The scribes continue their work, and you sense how rare their skill is. Literacy is not common here. This isn't a world where everyone reads bedtime stories on a screen. Writing is specialized, trained, guarded by the palace because it is a tool of control and coordination. The scribes are quiet power bearers. People who can turn a harvest into marks, and marks into action. You step back, letting their concentration remain unbroken. As you leave, you carry the sound of stylus on clay with you, a soft scratching lullaby, steadier than the cicadas outside. It follows you down the corridor like a thread, tying the storeroom's abundance to the palace's decisions. And as you drift onward, you can feel the next pull waiting for you, the world of hands again, of craft and heat and metal. Because once things are counted, they must be made, repaired, transformed. You keep moving, slow and held, with the scribe's quiet mark still humming behind your ribs. You leave the scribes behind, and it feels like stepping out of a room full of held breath into a space where breathe becomes visible again. The corridor opens toward warmer air, and the palace's quiet scratches give way to a different music, the soft thud of a mallet, the rasp of stone on metal, the rhythmic tension of fibers being pulled tight. Even without hearing it clearly yet, your body recognizes the presence of work. Work that sweats, work that burns, work that makes the kingdom tangible. A faint metallic tang grows stronger as you walk, and with it a taste on the back of your tongue, bronze and smoke and heat. You follow it like you followed bread earlier, because your senses are leading you through Mycenae in the most honest way, not by grand monuments, but by what keeps people alive. The workshop area is not a single tidy room. It's a cluster of spaces, some shaded, some open to air, some tucked against walls to protect fire from wind. The light here is more active. It flashes on polished surfaces. It flickers on soot-darkened stone. It catches on dust motes that drift like slow golden insects. You step closer and feel the warmth on your face, the kind of warmth that doesn't come from sun but from controlled flame. It's intimate heat, the heat of making. A metalworker stands near a low furnace or hearth. Charcoal glows in a shallow bed, and the air above it shimmers. Tools lie nearby, tongs, hammers, stone anvils, molds. Bronze is being shaped here, and you feel the seriousness of it. Bronze is not just metal. Bronze is the edge of the era. It is the difference between a wooden plow and a stronger one, between a dull blade and a sharp one, between a fragile society and one that can push outward. You watch a piece of metal, small, not a dramatic sword, but maybe a tool, a pin, a blade for cutting leather, being heated until it shifts color, turning from dull to glowing. The worker's hands move with a calm precision that makes you feel sleepy in the best way. There's nothing frantic. The fire is respected. The timing is understood. The metal is coaxed, not bullied. Nearby, a stone mold rests on the ground, its cavity shaped for something specific. Perhaps a small axe head, perhaps a dagger blade, perhaps a decorative fitting for a chest. You realize that beautiful and useful aren't separate categories here. A hinge can be elegant. A pin can be ornate. A weapon can be a status object. Function and meaning are braided together, and the braid is tight. Your mind drifts to the storerooms again, how the palace counts and saves. Here, the counted materials become objects. A measured ingot becomes a blade. A recorded amount of wool becomes cloth. The scribe's marks are turning into real things right in front of you, and the whole system feels suddenly more alive. You move a little farther, and the smell changes, less metal, more fiber. Wool and flax. Plant matter. A faint sharpness that suggests dye. Earthy reds, smoky browns, maybe that deep, precious purple that people will always chase even when it costs too much. The weaving space is calmer than the forge. but no less intense. Where the metalworker controls fire, the weaver controls tension. Looms stand upright, their wooden frames simple but sturdy. Threads hang like pale rain, weighted at the bottom with small stones or clay weights. You watch as hands pass the weft through the warp, back and forth, building cloth one patient line at a time. The motion is hypnotic. Pull, pass, beat. Pull, pass, beat. The loom is a slow heartbeat made visible. You notice the weaver's fingers, strong, quick, slightly roughened. These are hands that know how to read thread by feel, how to notice a weak spot before it breaks, how to fix a snag without making a scene. They work in a rhythm that doesn't need conversation. The loom itself is the language. Tension answers tension, pattern answers pattern. A basket nearby holds dyed yarn, and your eyes linger on the colors because your brain loves color right before sleep. A deep rust red like baked clay. A warm ochre like late sunlight on stone. A muted green like olive leaves. A blue that feels rarer, quieter, like the sky seen through a thin veil. The shades are neon, not artificial, but grounded, pulled from earth, plants, minerals. The dyes smell faintly bitter, like crushed leaves and heated roots. You watch someone lift a finished strip of cloth, and it catches light softly, not glossy, but alive with texture. You imagine it becoming a cloak, a wrap, a belt. You imagine it warming shoulders at night, carrying a child, covering a jar, serving as a gift. Cloth is everywhere in a human world. It holds heat. It signals status. It wraps the body and, in a way, wraps identity. And suddenly you understand something about Mycenae's golden hoards that will come later in your journey. Gold is loud, but cloth is constant. Gold sits in graves. Cloth touches skin every day. A small problem rises here, not dramatic, just the kind that threatens to irritate a whole system if left alone. You notice a thread on one loom fraying near the bottom, where the weight hangs. It's subtle, easy to miss, but you see it because you're in that calm, observant state the citadel has been training into you. If it snaps, it will disrupt the pattern. It will slow the work. It will cost time. You don't announce it, because you're not the main character who storms in with solutions. You're a visitor. You're learning. So you do the smallest helpful thing. You move closer, hands careful, and you adjust the weight slightly so the tension shifts away from the weakest point. You ease the strain. You buy time. You make the thread's life a little easier, which is honestly a beautiful thing to do for anything, thread or human. The fraying holds. The rhythm continues. In the forge area, you notice a different tiny hazard, a tool left too close to the heat, not yet glowing but warming in a way that could burn an inattentive hand. Again, you don't create a spectacle. You simply nudge it away with another piece of wood, sliding it to a safer spot. It's such a small action, but it keeps the workshop's calm intact. You begin to understand that the gentlest heroism is often just preventing unnecessary pain. You look around and see how many people in this citadel are engaged in making. Not just leaders and guards and scribes, but makers, craftspeople whose skill is the real foundation of the palace's power. Bronze tools mean better farming. Better farming means more grain. More grain means fuller storerooms. Fuller storerooms mean the palace can feed more workers. More workers mean more walls, more craft, more control. It's all connected, like a woven textile, or a cast mold, each part relies on the others. The air is warm and textured, and your mind begins to drift deeper, soothed by repetition, the loom's rhythm, the hammer's measured taps, the steady breath of the fire. You let your shoulders relax. You let your jaw unclench. You let the workshop sounds become the soft background of your thoughts. And in that calm, you notice something else. Beauty is being made here, quietly, without an audience. A pin shaped with a small curve. A pattern woven into cloth that no one will call art, because it's also a blanket. A tool polished until it feels good in the hand. Mycenae's grandeur is not only in its gate and walls. It's in these ordinary acts of care. You step away slowly, carrying the smell of metal and fiber with you, and you feel the citadel gently redirect you again, towards something even more basic than bronze or cloth. Because a city can have walls and tools and records and still fall apart if it cannot drink. You follow the faint suggestion of coolness ahead, the promise of water, and you keep moving, sleepy, steady, deeper into Mycenae's practical magic. You leave the warmth of metal and the soft rustle of weaving behind you, and the air feels suddenly thinner, more exposed. Not colder, just less sheltered. The kind of air that reminds you the sun is still up there doing its relentless job. And bodies still need the simplest thing they always need, water. You notice it first in your mouth. A faint dryness. Not desperate, not dramatic, but present enough to make you swallow and realize you've been breathing in smoke and heat and dust for a while. Mycenae is good at making you forget your own needs by filling you with wonder. Now it politely returns you to reality. You are a body. Bodies require maintenance. The path you follow isn't grand. It's functional. Stone steps that lead down a little, then sideways, then into a narrower passage where shade pools like a dark cloth. You feel the temperature drop by a fraction. Your skin relaxes. The air smells different here. Damp earth, cool stone, a faint mineral tang that makes your mind think of underground spaces. Water in a citadel is never just water. It's strategy. It's security. It's the difference between a city that holds and a city that panics. You approach a well area, partly enclosed, tucked where it's protected from sun and, just as importantly, from careless eyes. The stones around it are smoother from use, edges rounded by hands and ropes and buckets dragged over years. You see a rope coil resting nearby, thick and worn, fibers polished by friction. You see a bucket, wood or leather-lined, stained darker at the bottom. The well's mouth is a circle of shadow, and when you lean slightly, coolness rises up like a breath from the earth. For a moment, you just stand there and let that coolness touch your face. It feels like kindness. People come and go with the quiet seriousness water demands. They don't rush, but they don't dawdle either. They move with that balanced efficiency you've been seeing all day, steady, practiced, unshowy. Someone lifts a bucket with a controlled pull, muscles working without complaint. The rope creaks softly. Water appears, dark and shining, and the sight of it triggers something ancient in your brain, relief. Your shoulders drop before you even realize they were tense. You watch how water is handled, how it's poured carefully into jars, how spills are avoided, how containers are covered. Every drop matters. Not because the well is empty, but because wasting water is like insulting the earth. It's just not done. You take in the scene and begin to understand the deeper layer. Wells are vulnerable. A well can be poisoned. A well can be blocked. A well can be controlled by whoever controls access. In a citadel, water sources are guarded not always by soldiers, but by placement and habit and communal watchfulness. The well is positioned where it can be observed. People naturally notice who comes and goes. The community itself becomes the protection system. You drift along the edge, careful not to be in anyone's way, and your throat tightens a little, not from fear, but from awareness. You are thirsty, and thirst can make the mind impatient. It can make you sloppy. Mycenae doesn't reward sloppy. You consider stepping forward to drink, but you pause, because you don't want to break the invisible rules you've been learning. You wait for a natural opening, for a moment when you're not taking from someone's rhythm. And when the flow of bodies shifts, you move forward with the same calm you've adopted under the Lion Gate, under the palace's shadow, among the storerooms and looms. You dip your hands, or imagine dipping them, into the coolness, letting water touch your skin. It's not icy. It's not luxury spa water. It's groundwater, honest, mineral, slightly heavy. You bring it to your lips and drink slowly. The first swallow is a small reset. The second swallow is a deeper one. The third swallow feels like your whole nervous system unclenches, as if your body has been quietly arguing with the world and has finally been answered with something simple. You breathe out, and you can almost feel the heat leaving your head. But the citadel doesn't let you get too comfortable. Not because it's cruel, but because it's realistic. You notice something. The well area is busy, but it's also watched. Not with suspicion, exactly, but with alertness. People's eyes flicker to ropes and seals and jars. There's an awareness that water access must remain orderly. And your mind, still half asleep, picks up on a small tension. A bucket is set down a little too hard, splashing a small amount onto the stones. A tiny waste. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to ripple a faint irritation through the air. Then, more importantly, you notice a rope fraying, just a little, where it rubs against the stone lip. It's the same kind of tiny problem you noticed in the weaving room, subtle, but potentially disruptive. If the rope snaps with a full bucket, water will spill. Maybe the bucket will be damaged. Maybe someone will be hurt. And then water retrieval becomes slower, riskier, more stressful. One small weakness can create a whole new mood. Your chest tightens, not in panic, but in that gentle responsibility you've been practicing. You don't want to make a big deal. You don't want to interrupt. You just want the rope to survive. You look around and see a strip of leather nearby, maybe used for straps, maybe for repairs. You pick it up carefully and, without announcing yourself, you wrap it around the rope at the point of friction, adding a protective layer where fiber meets stone. You adjust the placement so it sits snug, taking the wear. It's not a perfect engineering solution, but it's enough. Enough is often what saves a day. You step back and watch as the rope runs again, now sliding with less abrasion. The movement is smoother. The risk decreases. The tension in the air eases, subtle but real. The well returns to being what it's meant to be, a steady source, not a drama factory. And then you notice another thing, something that feels like a secret Mycenae is willing to show you because you've behaved. There are routes here, not just one well. There are cisterns, hidden channels, clever placements that keep water available even if someone tries to cut it off. You catch a glimpse of a narrow passage leading downward, cooler than the rest, with stones that feel damp in places. You sense the citadel's preparedness. It doesn't rely on a single point of failure. It has backups. It has hidden reserves. Your sleepy mind finds that deeply comforting. Because maybe you, too, need more than one well. Maybe you need hidden cisterns, small quiet sources of replenishment that are protected from the sun of daily life. Maybe you need to stop relying on one brittle rope that's been rubbing against stone for too long. You don't stay in the well area for long. You drink, you breathe, you let your body reset, and then you move on, following the cool thread of shade back upward. As you leave, you carry the taste of mineral water in your mouth like a grounding charm. You feel steadier, less brittle, more capable of noticing beauty again. And as you climb toward the brighter spaces, you begin to sense something stirring elsewhere in the citadel, an energy of preparation, of gathering. Not panic, not chaos. Just the subtle shift that happens when people are about to do something communal. You follow that shift, letting the water's calm linger in you, as you drift toward the smell of salt and herbs and heat, the beginning of feast preparations waiting like a warm hearth in the next stretch of your dream. You drift toward the warmth the way your tired mind drifts toward a pillow, slow, obedient, quietly grateful. The citadel's cooler shadows fall behind you, and the air thickens with the scent of preparation, crushed herbs, heated fat, wood smoke, and that unmistakable tang of salt that always makes your body feel both hungry and slightly more alive. The space you enter isn't a single, feast hall, with dramatic lighting and cinematic angles. It's more practical than that, more Mycenae. It's a cluster of activity spreading outward from a few fire points, open hearths ringed with stone, low work surfaces, baskets set down in purposeful places, water jars stationed like quiet guardians. People move through it in overlapping loops, each person carrying a small task that fits into a larger pattern. No one stands around, posting. The work itself is the welcome. You feel it immediately. The tempo here is different from the storeroom's hush or the scribe's scratch. This is a communal rhythm, busy, but not frantic. It has the same steady efficiency you've been learning all day, like the citadel's signature. Do what needs doing, don't waste energy on theatrics, and please don't set anything important on fire unless it's supposed to be on fire. A shallow bowl passes your view, filled with coarse salt, pale, crystalline, slightly damp, clumping where fingers have pinched it. Another bowl holds herbs, green flecks and darker leaves, crushed and fragrant. You catch rosemary-like sharpness, maybe thyme, maybe something local your modern brain doesn't have a name for, but your senses recognize it anyway. This is the smell of making simple food feel like ceremony. Someone lifts a clay pot off a low flame and sets it down with careful hands. Steam rises, carrying the scent of legumes or grain, something hearty simmered into softness. Nearby, bread is being handled again, flat loaves turned, warmed, brushed with oil that makes their surfaces shine. It reminds you of the courtyard's first bread smoke, and your body responds the way it always does to that smell, a quiet loosening in the chest, like you've been holding yourself too tightly and don't need to anymore. You step to the side instinctively, because the flow of bodies here is real and you don't want to become a human obstacle. A person passes carrying a basket lined with cloth, the cloth slightly damp from the heat, keeping something fresh inside. Another carries thin skewers or sticks, their ends darkened from earlier use. Someone else is arranging bowls, coarse pottery, practical, sturdy, placing them in a way that suggests sharing, not individual portions. This is not a meal designed for personal plates and private silence. This is food as glue. The soundscape is soft but layered. A knife scraping against a wooden surface. The low crackle of fire. The thump of something being ground, maybe spices, maybe grain. The gentle clink of pottery as bowls are set down. Footsteps, steady and constant, like a heartbeat beneath everything. Even the air seems to vibrate with it, and your mind, already so ready for sleep, finds the repetition soothing. Like loom rhythm, but warmer. Like hammer taps, but rounder. Off to one side, you notice a small animal being handled. Nothing gruesome, nothing explicit, just the quiet reality that a feast requires protein and the ancient world doesn't pretend otherwise. You don't linger there. Your attention slides instead to the human care surrounding it. Hands cleaning, hands preparing, hands ensuring nothing is wasted. Even in the hard parts of life, Mycenae is practical. If something must be done, it's done without drama. A few people glance at you, not with suspicion, but with that same calm tolerance you felt earlier. Outsiders can exist here if they don't disrupt. And you've been practicing. You've been learning how to be small in a useful way. So you do what you've been doing all along. You read the space, find a gap, and offer yourself to the rhythm rather than demanding it include you. Your eyes catch on a stack of bowls that's slightly unstable, one bowl tilted, ready to slide. You can already imagine the sound of pottery breaking, the tiny flare of annoyance, the wasted work. So you step closer and straighten the stack, aligning rims so the weight settles properly. It's a small action, almost nothing, but it keeps the flows smooth. Mycenae loves smooth. You notice a cloth slipping off a basket and tuck it back, keeping flies away. You slide a jug a little farther from the fire's edge so the heat won't crack it. You nudge a bundle of kindling into a neater pile, because if the fire needs feeding later, someone will thank you without ever knowing they're thanking you. There's a gentle moment, wordless, brief, where someone's eyes meet yours and then move on, but the message is clear: you're fine here. Keep being calm. The feast preparations carry a sense of timing. People aren't just making food, they're coordinating it. Some things must be ready early. Some must be kept warm. Some are finished at the last moment, so they don't lose their texture. You watch as a pot lid is lifted, steam tested with a careful hand hovering above it, then replaced. You watch oil poured in a thin stream, not wasted, spread like a blessing over grain. You watch salt added in pinches, as if each pinch is counted, not by scribes, but by instinct, by respect for how hard salt is to gather and trade. And then the small problem arrives quietly, the way most problems arrive in real life, without dramatic music. A gust of wind slips through the space, turning a friendly fire into a smoky one. Smoke rolls sideways instead of up, and for a moment the air stings your eyes. People adjust without panic, but you feel the delicate balance. Too much smoke and the food tastes wrong, the eyes water, the mood sours. Too little heat and the timing collapses. You look around and spot a low stone screen, something used to guard the flame from wind. It's been shifted slightly, leaving an opening. You move it back into place with careful hands, aligning it so the fire breathes steadily again. The smoke lifts and thins, returning to its proper upward drift. The air clears. the stinging fades. No one makes a scene. The feast continues as it should. Your mind registers the lesson. Even celebration is maintenance. Especially celebration. As the work continues, you notice the gathering has more than food in it. There are small objects being set aside. Little bowls, a cup with a cleaner rim, a portion of bread placed separately, a tiny pool of oil in a shallow dish. Not leftovers. Not samples. Something more intentional. You feel it as a shift in the room's posture, like the palace center earlier, but warmer. The sense that not everything here is for mouths. Some things are for balance. You remember the storerooms and their sealed promise. You remember the scribes and their careful marks. You remember the rope at the well, protected from snapping. Mycenae survives by noticing the small points of failure before they become disasters, and by treating the unseen forces of life with the same practicality it treats firewood and grain. And now, as the scent of herbs deepens and the bowls line up like quiet moons on stone, you feel the preparations leaning gently toward ritual. Not a grand announcement. Just a natural next step, the way night naturally follows dusk. You stay with the rhythm, letting your breath match the steady movement around you, as the feast's warmth gathers, and somewhere just ahead, the first offerings begin to take shape in the soft hands of people who know that abundance isn't only eaten. You notice how the feast preparations begin to split into two streams, one meant for bellies, one meant for something less obvious but no less real. It's subtle at first, easy to miss if you're only following your hunger. A piece of bread set aside with extra care. A bowl rinsed more thoroughly than the others. A small cup filled not to the brim, but to an exact, thoughtful level, as if someone is measuring with more than their eyes. You drift after that second stream, the quiet one, because your body is warm with firelight now and your mind is soft enough to sense meanings that aren't shouted. The space shifts again, not a new scene, not a fresh introduction, just a slight change in posture. People move a little slower here. Their gestures become smaller, more contained. The fire is still present, but it's treated differently, less as a cooking tool, more as a living thing you negotiate with. Smoke rises in thinner threads. Oil glints in shallow dishes. Someone's hands carry a small bundle of flowers or herbs, pale petals, green stems, nothing extravagant, just gathered beauty. You follow along a stone path that leads to a modest focal point, a low platform, a corner of the courtyard's edge, a spot where stone has been darkened by repeated contact with ash and oil. It's not a grand altar with gold and spectacle. It's a practical surface that has learned, over time, to hold ritual without needing decoration. A shallow dish is set down, and a small pool of olive oil catches the light like liquid sun. Another dish holds grains, barley, maybe, pale and dry, ready to be scattered. A piece of bread rests nearby, torn rather than cut, because tearing feels older, more human. There is a sense of economy here too, nothing is wasted. Offerings are not about showing off wealth. They're about acknowledging the fragile balance that keeps wealth possible. You feel the citadel's logic. If you want the storerooms full, you honor the forces that make harvests happen. If you want the well to keep giving, you respect what lies beneath the stone. If you want your animals healthy, you treat luck like something you can cooperate with. People here don't talk about belief as a hobby. They treat it as maintenance. Someone lifts a small cup, tips it, and lets a thin stream of liquid fall, oil or wine, onto stone. It spreads in a dark, shining stain. The scent rises, sharp, rich, slightly sweet. The air seems to change around it, the way air changes when a candle is lit in a dark room. Not because the physics are dramatic, but because attention is. You watch smoke being coaxed upward, maybe from a pinch of herbs dropped onto embers, maybe from incense-like resin warmed carefully. The smoke curls, pale and deliberate, and your mind follows it the way a sleepy mind follows clouds. It climbs, thins, disappears, and somehow the disappearance feels like part of the point. Offerings aren't always about what stays. Sometimes they're about what you let go of. A few grains are scattered onto the stone, and the sound is tiny, a soft patter, almost nothing. But the gesture lands with weight because it's repeated, because it's known, because it's done by hands that have seen how quickly a good season can turn. You stand a little back, giving space, and you notice how people around you carry their own private attention. Some touch their fingers lightly to their chest or forehead. Some simply bow their heads for a breath. No dramatic kneeling, no theatrical sobbing. Just a quiet recognition. We are not in control of everything, so we behave as if we are guests in the world rather than owners. Your mind slides toward the Lion Gate again, those headless lions guarding the threshold. Mycenae is full of guardians, stone guardians at the gate, human guardians at the storerooms, scribes guarding records, craft people guarding skills, and now these small rituals guarding balance. The citadel isn't only defended by walls. It's defended by habits. A tiny problem flickers into view here too, because even rituals can be interrupted by something as banal as wind. A breeze slips through, stronger than before, and the smoke wavers, flattening sideways. A few grains scatter farther than intended. A flower petal lifts and lands in ash. The fire flares for a second, and you feel that tiny edge of discomfort in the people nearby. Not panic, not anger, just the feeling of something delicate being nudged off-center. You step forward, and you do what you've been doing all day. You help without becoming the story's loudest person. You find a stone bowl that can act as a windshield and place it near the embers, creating a small barrier that lets the smoke rise more cleanly again. You gather a few scattered grains with your fingertips and return them to the dish, not because the gods will punish a lost barley kernel, but because the act of care is the point. You adjust the flour bundle so it rests securely, petals protected from being thrown into the wrong place. The wind passes. The smoke resumes its slow ascent. The room's subtle tension eases. Ritual returns to its intended pace, unhurried, attentive, practical. And you feel something settle in you, too. Because this is a story about Mycenae, yes, but it's also a story about what humans do when they live inside uncertainty. They build walls. They store grain. They keep records. They make tools. They protect wells. And when all that is done, they still stand before a small dish of oil and ask the world to remain kind. It's not childish. It's intelligent. It's the emotional equivalent of wrapping leather around a fraying rope. You can't control the stone lip, but you can reduce friction. You can't control the weather, but you can show respect and hope the respect returns in some form. You can't control time, but you can mark it with smoke and grain and oil so it doesn't feel like pure chaos. The offering ends without a clear end. It simply tapers, like a song fading. The dishes remain, the stains darken, the embers glow low. People drift back toward the feast preparations, and the two streams merge again, ritual returning to food, food returning to community. You follow them, carrying that softened sense of balance with you. And as you re-enter the warmer bustle, you sense a wider social current. The gathering is not only about eating. It's about reaffirming bonds, about smoothing small tensions, about keeping the citadel's human machinery running with less grinding. Which means, inevitably, you'll soon brush against the delicate edges of social order, where a small misplacement can become a problem, and a small kindness can quietly resolve it. You keep moving, slow and steady, letting the last curl of smoke linger in your imagination as you drift toward the next subtle ripple in Mycenae's life. You drift back into the warmth of preparation, and the two streams, food for mouths, offerings for balance, fold together again like fabric returning to its loom. The fires are steadier now. The smoke rises in clean threads. Bowls line up in patient rows. Bread waits under cloth, keeping its softness. Oil glints in shallow dishes like captured sunlight, and your body, still soothed by mineral water, feels almost cooperative. People begin to shift from making to arranging, from cooking to distributing. The movement changes in a way you can feel in your bones, less circling, more placing. Less testing, more committing. The kind of moment where timing matters, and everyone's hands suddenly look a little more careful. A few jars are carried in, small amphories sealed, tagged, their bellies dark with stored promise. They're set down near a shaded wall, close enough to the fires to stay workable, far enough not to crack. You recognize the posture of storage even in a temporary feast setup. Protect the resources, keep them accounted for, don't let chaos nibble at the edges. And then the thin problem arrives. It doesn't arrive with shouting or drama. It arrives the way real trouble usually does, as a pause. A hiccup in a rhythm so well practiced that even a half-second of stillness feels loud. One of the people carrying jars stops a fraction too long. Their hands hover over a sealed amphora as if something about it feels wrong. Another person steps closer, eyes narrowing, not suspicious in a theatrical way, but alert in a practical way. Bodies angle inward. The space tightens. The hum of work doesn't stop, but it shifts around this point like water around a rock. You move a little closer, not to stare, but because your instincts have been trained all evening to notice where the citadel's smoothness begins to grind. On the ground, near the base of a jar, you see a small lump of clay, an impression seal, lying where it shouldn't be. It's not broken into dust. It's intact enough to still hold its stamped mark, but it's separated from its cord. The cord itself dangles in frayed strands from the jar's handle, like a snapped tendon. That is not ideal. In Mycenae, a seal isn't just a seal. It's a promise. This was closed, counted, trusted. A seal says, no one touched this without leaving evidence. When the seal is on the ground, the promise feels shaky. And in a place built on controlled flow, grain, oil, wool, labor, shaky promises are how systems start to unravel. You sense it immediately, a subtle hardening in the air. Not anger, not fear, but the sharp awareness that oil is precious and trust is even more precious, and the two are annoyingly connected. A pair of eyes flicks from the snapped cord to the jar's mouth, checking for signs of tampering. Another set of eyes scans the ground for droplets. Someone's hand hovers near the jar as if deciding whether to move it or leave it exactly where it is until the right person sees it. That is how you know the tension is real. Nobody wants to touch anything first. Touching first is how blame begins. You feel your own heartbeat pick up, soft but noticeable, like a drum heard through a wall. And because your brain is sleepy and sarcastic, a thought slides in. Nothing builds community like the possibility someone stole the olive oil. Forget wars. Forget monsters. A missing seal can turn a peaceful evening into a whole philosophical crisis. You don't speak, because there is no dialogue in this dream, and also because silence is your safest tool right now. Instead, you step into the role you've been quietly practicing all day, the calm observer who helps the rhythm return. You crouch near the fallen seal, careful not to disturb the ground around it. The clay is cool in your fingers, and the impression is clear, some sign of authority, a mark that ties this jar to the palace's system. You turn it slightly in the light, letting your eyes read what your mind can't translate. The important part isn't the symbol itself. It's the fact that it still exists. You lift your gaze to the snapped cord. The fibers look worn, not freshly cut. Frayed, not clean. That detail lands in you like a small breath of relief, but you don't assume anything yet. Mycenae taught you not to rush. The storerooms taught you that accidents and vulnerabilities can look suspicious until you examine them properly. You check the jar's mouth without touching it, just close enough to see. The stopper seems seated. The rim isn't smeared with fresh oil. There's no obvious wet shine running down the belly. That's good. But no obvious is not the same as safe. In a world like this, certainty has to be earned. Someone nearby gestures, not a command, just a small motion that gathers attention and then points subtly toward the interior, toward the palace's administrative spaces, toward the people who make order visible. You understand. This isn't a handle it later problem. This is a keep the system intact right now problem. You rise slowly, the seal still in your hand, and follow the gesture. The path back toward the palace corridors feels narrower than it did a short while ago, not because the stone changed, but because your awareness changed. You can feel the citadel's layers again, the feast warmth behind you, the palace's controlled hush ahead, the storeroom's cool patience beyond. You move through it all like a thread being pulled through fabric, steady, careful, trying not to snag. As you walk, your mind pulls up all the day's small lessons like tools in a kit. You remember the rope at the well, fraying where it rubbed against stone. You remember how a simple wrap reduced friction. You remember the loom thread, thinning under too much tension. You remember how a small adjustment bought time. You remember the scribe's smudged clay corner, and how quickly a tiny blur threatened clarity. This feels like that. Another thin weakness in a thick world. Another tiny point where wear and tear can masquerade as wrongdoing. You reach the quieter administrative area again, where clay and styluses live. The air is cooler here, less smoky. The sounds are softer. A scribe's space holds a different kind of tension, not the tension of fire, but of correctness. Of records matching reality. Of seals meaning what they claim. You hold the fallen seal out in your palm, letting it be seen without making it a performance. You feel eyes track it, track your hands, track your posture. The attention is sharp but not hostile. It's the attention of people who have learned that systems survive by noticing details. A tablet is brought out, fresh or drying, marked with neat signs, and you realize what the real risk is. If this jar's seal is compromised, its place in the record becomes uncertain. If its place in the record becomes uncertain, distribution becomes messy. If distribution becomes messy, resentment grows. And resentment, in a citadel, is more dangerous than any outsider at the Lion Gate. You watch hands hover above tablets, above cords, above clay. You watch someone tilt their head, thinking, tracing connections you can't see. You feel the room's quiet tighten, not in panic, but in concentration. And then you sense the problem deepen by one small step. Because the jar isn't the only thing in question. If one seal snapped unnoticed, what else might have shifted? Another jar miscounted. A tag misplaced. A cord weakened. A thin crack in the smooth machine. You're gently pulled into that widening circle of concern, not with words, but with movement. A hand indicates a direction. A body turns and begins walking back toward the storerooms. You've fallen behind, because you've already become part of the citadel's rhythm, and because your calm is oddly useful in moments like this. As you walk, the air grows cooler again, and the scent of stored oil and clay returns. The storerooms wait ahead, silent, sealed, full of answers if you know how to read them. You tighten your fingers around the fallen seal, not gripping it like a weapon, but holding it like a fragile truth. Somewhere behind you, the feast warmth continues, trying to remain warm. Somewhere ahead, the storerooms hold their patient breath. And you, sleepy, steady, quietly determined, step toward the kingdom's jars, where a snapped cord has turned abundance into a question mark. You enter the storerooms again, and the first thing you feel is the way cool air changes your emotions. Heat makes people reactive. Coolness makes them think. The palace knows this, even if no one says it out loud. It keeps its most important reserves in spaces that calm the body, because a calm body makes fewer stupid choices. Rows of amphorae stand in dim order, their bellies rounded like sleeping animals. The scent of olive oil is faint but present, threaded through clay and dust. Honey's sweetness lingers in the background like a memory. Grain smells dry and clean. Everything here feels steady, almost too steady for the tension you carried in with you. You hold the fallen seal in your palm and walk carefully, following the subtle guidance of those who understand this system better than you ever will. They move without urgency, but with precision. No stomping. No dramatics. Just a quiet shift of bodies toward the area where seals and cords are managed, where records and reality meet. You begin to notice how the storerooms are laid out not only for storage, but for verification. There are clusters of jars with matching marks. There are tags that correspond to certain locations. There are shelves or niches where sealings are kept when jars are opened and resealed. There are patterns, visible once you know to look for them, that make it harder for a single error to hide. Mycenae doesn't rely on one person's memory. It builds redundancy into its habits. A person takes you toward a section where cords and sealings are stored, small lumps of clay ready to be pressed, cords cut to length, tags marked with simple signs. The materials look humble, but you can feel their importance. A seal isn't decoration. It's a lock made of social trust. Your mind, still half lulled, starts to assemble the likely story. The cord snapped from where the seal fell. The jar might still be closed. The feast preparations noticed before distribution began. The system is doing what it's designed to do: catch small failures early, prevent them from becoming accusations. You're relieved, but you don't let yourself relax too soon. Mycenae doesn't reward premature certainty. It rewards careful checking. You reach the area where the jar in question is kept, either already here, or the matching record is here, and you watch as the process begins, almost ritual-like in its own way. Someone brings out a tablet or a reference mark. Someone checks the jar's sign, painted or scratched. Someone compares cords, tags, seal impressions. The attention is intense but quiet. It's the same kind of focus you saw in the scribe room, but now it's applied to physical objects. You notice a small tray with older sealings, clay lumps that once secured jar mouths, now kept as evidence of past openings. Each has an impression, a history. They sit like tiny fossils of trust. You realize this is the palace's memory. If a dispute ever arises, these sealings can tell a story. The person examining your fallen seal turns it in the light, comparing its impression to a known stamp, maybe pressed into another clay piece nearby, maybe remembered by the hands that have handled hundreds. The match is found, and you feel the tension in the room softened by a degree. This seal belongs. It is not a strange mark. It is not an intruder's sign. Then attention moves to the cord. A frayed cord is held up, the fibers examined. The wear looks honest, uneven, softened, stressed by repeated friction. It does not look cut clean. That detail matters. It shifts the narrative from "someone interfered" to "the system needs maintenance." And that shift is everything. You feel the citadel exhale around you. Not fully, because responsibility remains, but enough that the air stops feeling sharp. The fear of accusation fades. The fear of theft fades. What remains is a more manageable truth: things wear out. Now comes the gentle resolution, the kind Mycenae seems to prefer. No blame. No spectacle. Just repair. A fresh cord is cut. It's measured carefully, not too long, not too short, because too long invites tangling and too short invites snapping. A clay lump is softened with a touch of water, pressed into readiness. The jar's mouth is checked one more time, still seated, still clean, still sealed. Then the cord is looped through the handle and around the stopper, tightened with practiced hands. The fallen seal impression is recreated, or a new sealing is pressed with the same authority mark, restoring the lock. The stylus of administration meets the clay of reality again. A tablet is updated. A mark is made. The jar's status becomes clear, verified, resealed, safe for distribution. You watch the process with the kind of reverence you didn't expect to feel for a cord and a clay lump. But you've been learning all day that the sacred here is not separated from the practical. Maintenance is ritual. Verification is ceremony. The survival of a community depends on small acts done correctly. A person takes the old snapped cord and sets it aside, not as evidence of wrongdoing, but as a reminder, an item to be checked, a sign that other cords might need inspection too. And this is where Mycenae shows its real intelligence. The resolution doesn't stop at the single jar. The system uses the incident as a prompt to prevent repeats. You follow as they move along a row of jars, hands checking chords, lightly tugging, feeling tension, noticing phrase. It's not frantic. It's preventive. The storerooms shift into a new mode, a brief maintenance sweep, like a body checking its own pulse after a small scare. You help in the smallest ways you can. You hold a coil of cord when it's offered into your reach. You steady a small tray of clay ceilings so it doesn't tip. You pick up a tag that slips to the floor and set it back where it belongs. Every action you take is quiet, unshowy, designed to keep the flows smooth. The sweep reveals a few chords that look worn, nothing dramatic, just the ordinary fatigue of fibers in a world of heavy jars. They're replaced, one by one, with calm efficiency. The storerooms remain ordered. Trust is not shaken, it is reinforced. The system has proven it can catch a weakness and respond without tearing itself apart. And then, slowly, the citadel's attention begins to drift back toward warmth, toward food, toward community. You walk back out of the storerooms, and the air grows warmer with each step, your skin adjusting like a leaf turning towards sun. The feast preparations are still underway, the bowls still waiting, the bread still breathing under cloth. You can feel how close the citadel came to a different mood, one of suspicion, of fracture, and how gently it returned to cohesion. It's almost tender, the way Mycenae resolves things, by leaning into systems rather than emotions, by verifying rather than accusing, by repairing rather than punishing. It's not a modern moral lesson. It's a survival strategy. A community that turns every small problem into a feud does not last long in a harsh world. As you re-enter the gathering space, the warmth feels deeper, more earned. The fire's crackle sounds softer. The smell of herbs feels kinder. People move with that steady rhythm again, and you sense a subtle, almost invisible gratitude, not directed at you personally, but at the fact that the evening can remain what it was meant to be, communal, steady, nourishing. And now, as bowls are arranged and food is finally set out for shared eating, you feel the citadel's energy start to shift towards something else, toward light fading, toward dusk approaching, toward the ridge outside the walls turning gold in the last sun. The feast will feed bodies, but night will feed something different, memory. You follow that quiet pull toward evening, toward the ridge and the changing light, carrying with you the simple satisfaction of a problem solved gently, like a frayed rope wrapped in leather, like a thread eased back into tension, like trust restored with clay and careful hands. You let the feast's warmth taper behind you, not because you're fleeing it, but because evening is doing that ancient thing it always does, pulling attention outward. The citadel begins to change its voice as the light shifts. Daytime Mycenae is all edges and labor and controlled motion. Dusk Mycenae becomes something softer, like the stone itself is exhaling after holding its posture for hours. You follow a path that climbs toward the ridge line, where the walls rise higher and the view opens wider. The ground underfoot feels warmer than it should, storing the sun's last generosity. Your skin still holds a faint scent of smoke and herbs from the cooking fires, and somewhere in your mind the taste of mineral water and olive oil lingers like a grounding charm. You're not rushing. You're drifting at the speed the citadel prefers, steady, attentive, unbothered by the concept of hurry. A few locals move the same direction, not in a parade, not escorting you like your royalty, but simply walking in the way people walk when they're done with the heaviest tasks and the sky has become interesting again. They carry small things, A folded cloth, a clay lamp, a bundle of kindling. Someone cradles a shallow bowl with a lid, taking leftovers or offerings inward. Someone else has a cloak thrown over one shoulder, because dusk brings that first hint of coolness that makes you remember you have bones. The air up here is cleaner. Less smoke, more wind. It tastes like dry grass and stone and distant salt. You catch a faint aroma of crushed thyme under your steps, and it makes the whole ridge feel like a sleeping herb garden. The sounds change too. The daytime scraping and hammering fades into softer noises, sandals on stone, the occasional clink of pottery, the low rustle of cloth. Somewhere below, a late bird calls, and the sound feels like a small punctuation mark at the end of the day. You reach a spot where the wall curves and the land drops away. The argolet spreads out beneath you, fields, low hills, scattered trees, and beyond that the suggestion of the sea, pale and bright at the horizon. The sunlight is lower now, turning everything into a study of gold and shadow. The plains look softer, almost forgiving, as if the landscape is trying to pretend it doesn't contain hardship. You lean your hands against the stone parapet and feel its warmth under your palms. It's the same wall you touched earlier on the ramp, but now it feels like a companion rather than a warning. The stone has been absorbing heat all day, and it gives it back slowly, like a patient animal you can rest against. You realize how many people have stood exactly here, evening after evening, letting the view remind them the world is larger than the citadel's routines. Down on the plain, you see tiny movements, dark specks that could be animals being guided home, or people returning from fields, or smoke rising from distant hearths. Life continues outside the Cyclopean walls. The citadel is the center of power, but it isn't the whole world. That fact feels oddly soothing. Your worries shrink when you remember you are not the axis of history. You're just passing through it. The sky begins to shift colors, not dramatic neon, but slow, earthy hues, pale amber near the horizon, then a wash of soft blue fading toward cooler tones overhead. Clouds, if there are any, take on a gentle blush. You watch the light catch on stone edges, turning rough faces into glowing surfaces for a few minutes before the glow slides away. The Lion Gate, somewhere behind you, is probably doing the same quiet transformation, its lion bodies becoming less intimidating and more dreamlike as shadows deepen. A small lamp is lit nearby, not with a modern click or flare, but with the careful coaxing of flame into oil. Olive oil again, the quiet ruler of Mycenae, feeding a wick, producing a steady, warm light that looks like liquid gold turned into breath. More lamps appear, one by one, as if the citadel is gently switching from sun power to oil power without anyone needing to announce the transition. The smell of warm oil rises, faint but comforting, like a promise that night will be managed. You remember the storerooms, the bellies of amphory, the seals, the cords, the way a snapped fiber almost changed the mood of an entire community. You remember how calmly it was resolved, verification, repair, resealing. Looking out at the dusk, you feel how much of Mycenae is built on that same principle. Notice weakness early. Reduce friction. Replace what's fraying. Keep the machine from grinding itself into dust. It makes you think of the rope at the well, wrapped in leather to keep it from snapping. It makes you think of the loom thread eased back into gentler tension. It makes you think of the scribe smoothing a smudged corner before it hardened into confusion. Mycenae survives because people here don't wait for small problems to become myths. They fix them while they're still small and manageable. The ridge wind touches your face, cooler now, and it carries the smell of evening, dust settling, fire smoke thinning, distant animals, the faint sweetness of crushed plant sap. Insects begin their nighttime work, a soft chorus starting up in the grasses below. It's not loud. It's more like a steady blanket of sound, the kind your brain can sink into. The citadel feels less like a fortress and more like a sleeping creature, its walls the curve of its back, its lamps the slow blinking of eyes. You notice how people's bodies soften at dusk. Shoulders drop. Steps slow. The day's tightness loosens. Even the most controlled spaces, palace corridors, storerooms, seem to relax. Night doesn't erase hierarchy, but it blurs it a little. In the dim, everyone becomes more similar, warm-blooded, tired, human. Someone passes carrying a small bundle of flowers or herbs, left over from the earlier offering, maybe, or gathered fresh for another quiet ritual. The scent trails behind them, and it makes you think of unseen balance again, of how people here treat the invisible the way they treat a lamp wick. Keep it tended, keep it steady, don't let it go out unless you want trouble. As the sun dips lower, the ridge line beyond the citadel becomes a silhouette, dark hills against glowing sky. And in that silhouette, your mind begins to feel the presence of the land's other stories. Not the daily ones of bread and oil and wool, but the deeper ones, of those who came before, those who are remembered, those who are buried. The earth around Mycenae is not empty. It holds echoes. You stand there, warmed by stone, cooled by wind, and you feel a quiet pull toward the edge of the citadel's living world and into the spaces where the dead are honored. It isn't morbid. It's natural. Dusk is the hour when everything feels closer, the past, the present, the breath you take and the breath you release. The lamps glow brighter as the sky darkens, and the air takes on that soft, suspended quality right before night fully arrives. You take one more slow look across the plain, letting the gold fade gently out of the world, and then you turn, because the citadel's next invitation is waiting in shadowed stone. Somewhere nearby, beyond the daily paths, a beehive-tomb sits with its rounded darkness, ready to give your footsteps back to you as echoes. And you, already moving at a dream's pace, begin to follow the quiet guidance of the locals toward that ancient curve of earth and masonry, toward the place where sound becomes honeyed and memory becomes architecture. You walk away from the ridge lamps and into deeper shadow, and the citadel feels like it's lowering its voice on purpose, the way a good storyteller does when the room is finally quiet. The paths become less busy now. The day's work has folded inward. The air cools enough that your skin remembers it can goosebump. You draw your cloak tighter. Whether you actually have one or your imagination provides, it doesn't matter. Your body accepts the comfort either way. The locals who drift this direction don't treat it like a grand procession. It's more like a practiced habit, an evening movement toward a place that holds meaning. They carry small lamps, their flames steady in shallow cups, wicks drinking olive oil with that patient devotion you've been noticing everywhere. The light pulls on stone, then slides away, turning each step into a soft reveal and conceal. The world narrows around you, not in a claustrophobic way, but in a calming one, like the citadel is gently drawing your attention inward, toward quieter things. You feel the ground change underfoot as you move beyond the most lived-in spaces. fewer scuffs. Less ash. More loose gravel, more grass. The scent of herbs returns, thyme and dry leaf, crushed under sandals. A faint sweetness rises from somewhere. Maybe night-blooming plants, maybe just the imagination layering comfort onto the air. The sky overhead is darker now, but not fully night. There's still a lingering glow, enough to outline the walls behind you and the land ahead. And then you see it. A long, shallow cut in the earth, like a corridor carved out of hillside. The entrance to a beehive-tomb, Tholos, doesn't shout. It waits. It sits in the landscape with a kind of contained dignity, as if it knows you will approach whether or not it demands your attention. The passage leading to it, its dramas, feels like a slow funnel, guiding your body forward, guiding your mind into a different mood. The stones lining the passage are tall and close, and you feel that familiar shift again, space training your posture. Your shoulders settle. Your breath slows. Your voice, if you had one poised to speak, remains behind your teeth. The air in the dramas is cooler, sheltered from the wind, and it smells faintly of earth and old stone. You can almost taste minerals on it. The locals move with that same quiet practicality as always. No dramatic bowing. No theatrics. They simply treat this place with respectful care, like you treat a sleeping person. You don't slam doors. You don't stomp. You don't bring unnecessary noise. You walk down the passage, and the tomb's doorway grows larger. It's framed by stone that looks both simple and immense, lintels and uprights, a threshold built to last. Above the doorway, the stonework forms a relieving triangle, an architectural breath that prevents collapse. The geometry is practical, and yet it feels symbolic too, as if the builders wanted to show that even the weight of earth can be negotiated with intelligence. You stop at the threshold for a moment, because something in you knows you should. The tomb's darkness is not empty. It's full of cool air, full of silence, full of the potential for your own thoughts to bounce back at you. You can feel it like a pressure change against your skin. You step inside. Immediately, the world shifts. The air is colder, real cold, the kind that lives underground. The smell is earth and stone and something faintly sweet or dusty, like old dried flowers that once lay here and have long since turned into memory. The ceiling curves upward in a perfect beehive dome, stones set in rings that climb toward a point above you. Even in lamplight, you can feel the geometry. The dome isn't merely structure. It's intention. It holds space the way a cup holds water. You take another step, and your foot scuffs lightly. The sound returns to you. Not as a sharp echo, but as a softened double, like your movement has been wrapped in cloth and handed back. The dome catches your noises and gently repeats them, rounding their edges. Even your breathing becomes audible in a new way, deeper, larger, as if the tomb is amplifying your existence just enough to remind you, you are here, and you are small, and the space is listening. You try a slow shuffle of your feet, just to feel it. The sound blooms, then fades. You inhale, exhale. The exhale seems to hover a fraction longer than it should, as if the air itself is reluctant to let it go. Beehive-tomb echoes. You understand now why people remember this sensation. It's not just acoustics. It's a feeling of being answered by stone. A lamp is set down near the wall, its light warming the rough surfaces into amber. The stones are fitted in that Mycenaean way, large blocks, carefully placed, slightly irregular, yet beautifully coherent as a whole. Some surfaces glisten faintly with moisture. Others look powdery with age. You run your fingertips along a stone and feel its coldness bite gently back, not painful, just honest. The tomb's air holds your hand's warmth like a secret. You move deeper toward the chamber's center, and you feel the darkness thicken around the edges of lamplight. The tomb is mostly shadow. The light doesn't fill it. It only shapes it. Shadows curve along the walls like water, pooling in the ringed seams between stones. The dome above you disappears into darkness at its highest point, making the chamber feel larger than it might actually be. Your mind loves this, because the sleepy mind enjoys being in a space that feels endless but safe. You stand still for a moment and let the silence settle. It's not absolute silence. Nothing is. There's the faint hiss of lamp flame, the tiny crackle of wick, the soft movement of bodies breathing. But the tomb's silence is different from the palace's silence. Palace silence is controlled. Tomb silence is accepting. It doesn't demand productivity. It doesn't care about records. It doesn't care about storerooms. It holds time like a slow, heavy blanket. Your thoughts begin to drift, and the tomb answers with echoes that make your inner world feel external. You imagine the chamber filled, long ago, with ritual movement, people carrying offerings, laying objects, sealing entrances, stepping back. You imagine the last footsteps, the last lamp extinguished, the last breath exhaled before the living world closed the door and left the dead with their own quiet. You don't see bones. You don't see gore. This story keeps its gentleness. But you feel presence, the way you feel presence in a room someone has just left, an impression in the air, a change in temperature, a faint sense of gravity that isn't physics alone. The tomb's dome begins to feel like a night sky made of stone. The rings of masonry resemble the slow circles of time itself, season after season, harvest after harvest, rulers rising and falling, jars sealed and unsealed, ropes fraying and being wrapped, threads woven and worn, lamps lit and extinguished. Everything repeats. Everything returns. Everything becomes an echo eventually. A small problem comes to you here too, but it's not practical like a snapped cord. It's softer, more human. The lamp flame wavers, and for a moment the shadows lurch. Your heart tightens slightly, not fear, exactly, but the instinctive discomfort of losing light in a place that already feels infinite. The tomb doesn't threaten you, but darkness always asks your body to pay attention. You breathe slowly, the way you did before drinking at the well. You steady your mind the way you steadied the rope, the thread, the smoke. You move closer to the lamp and adjust the wick gently, feeding it a touch more oil. The flame steadies. The shadows settle back into smooth curves. The tomb returns to its slow, listening calm. And you realize, even here, in a place of death, the living still practice maintenance. Light is kept steady. Calm is kept steady. The balance is kept, because that's what humans do when they want to survive the dark. You look up again, letting your eyes trace the curve of the dome until they can't. You feel your breath returning to you in soft echoes. You feel the chamber holding you, not as a prison, but as a bowl holding water. For a moment, you don't feel like a visitor. You feel like a small part of the citadel's longer story, a story that includes walls and bread and records and looms, yes, but also includes this: a quiet space where sound becomes round and gentle, where the living meet the dead without words, and where the earth itself seems to hum with memory. You turn slowly, preparing to leave, because the tomb is not meant for lingering forever. It is meant to remind you that everything stored will one day be buried, and everything buried will one day be found, or not, and that in either case, time continues its steady work. As you step back toward the entrance passage, your footsteps echo softly behind you, like the tomb is reluctant to let you go. You carry that echo in your chest as you emerge into the cooler night air, where the lamps outside seem brighter than they did before. And now, with the dome's sound still ringing in your bones, you feel the next pull, toward the places where Mycenae's royal dead are remembered in more visible form. The grave circles, the artifacts, the weight of splendor that will soon shimmer like trapped sunlight. You keep walking, slow and steady, with the beehive-tomb's honeyed echoes following you like a lullaby. You step back into the open night air, and for a moment it feels too wide after the tomb's curved hush. The sky is darker now, the last blush of dusk gone, replaced by a deep blue-black sprinkled with faint stars. The lamps carried by the locals glow warmer against the darkness, little islands of oil-fed steadiness. Your ears still hold the tomb's soft echoes, as if the beehive dome has taught your body a new way to listen. You walk along a path that skirts the citadel's quieter edges, where the ground is uneven and the stonework feels less like daily life and more like memory. The air smells of dry earth and night herbs. Somewhere, a low insect chorus continues its patient work. You feel the cooling stone beneath your feet, the way it releases the day's heat slowly, as if even the ground is reluctant to let go of warmth. Ahead, the space opens into an area that feels different, not because someone labels it, but because your body senses the shift. The locals move with a slightly altered attention here. Their steps are still calm, but their gestures become smaller, more careful. You recognize the posture. It's the same posture you saw near offerings. The same posture you felt at the tomb threshold. It's the posture humans take when they are near the dead and want to do it properly. You have arrived near the grave circles, royal burials that sit inside Mycenae's heart like a quiet, heavy pulse. The area is not lit brightly. It doesn't need to be. A few lamps are enough to make the stones visible, enough to reveal circular boundaries and upright markers, enough to show you where earth has been disturbed and restacked and remembered. The grave circles feel less like a cemetery in the modern sense and more like a statement. These are the people the citadel claims, the ancestors used as proof of legitimacy, the dead turned into a foundation for power. You move slowly, letting your eyes adjust. You see stone rings, low walls enclosing burial spaces. You see slabs that might have once covered pits. You see the shapes of carved stones, not ornate, but deliberate. Even in darkness, you can feel the geometry, circles within walls, memory inside fortification. You feel the weight of it in your chest, not sadness exactly, but gravity. This is where ambition ends up. This is where leadership becomes still. This is where the Wanax's shadow finally stops moving. And yet there is also splendor here. Not flashy in the lamplight, but present as a kind of aura, because these burials are tied to stories of wealth, golden masks, decorated weapons, jewelry, royal hoards that have made Mycenae famous in the modern imagination. Your mind tries to picture it, gold catching lamplight like small suns, hammered into shape, laid near bodies as if wealth could accompany you into the dark. But you are careful with the image. This is bedtime. This is quiet. No gore, no harshness. You do not see bodies. You see symbols. You see offerings. You see the human impulse to surround death with beauty so it feels less like a door slamming shut and more like a passage. You walk along the edge of one circle and notice how the stones are worn, not by weather alone, but by attention. People have stood here before you, perhaps during rituals, perhaps during remembrance, perhaps during moments of political theater where ancestry is pointed at like evidence. A finger tracing a stone. A palm resting briefly. A lamp placed down with care. The circles have been used, not just built. A small dish sits near a stone base, maybe with a residue of oil, maybe with ash, maybe with dried petals. It tells you offerings still happen here. Not constantly, not flamboyantly, but enough that the place remains active in the community's sense of balance. The dead are not forgotten. They are incorporated into the living system. The living feed the dead with attention, and the dead feed the living with legitimacy. You pause near one marker and let the lamplight play on its surface. The stone looks ordinary, but your mind fills it with extraordinary associations: king, queen, warrior, ancestor, ruler, remembered name. You imagine the burial goods that might have been placed here: bronze swords, cups, beads, seals, textiles that have long since vanished, leaving only the idea of softness behind. You imagine gold, thin sheets hammered and shaped, laid near faces, not to hide death, but to honor identity. A mask that preserves the impression of a person's status, if not their features. You think briefly about the Lion Gate again. 2 lion bodies guarding entry. Here, the dead are guarded too, by circles, by ritual, by memory, by the fact that their resting places have been woven into the citadel's center. Mycenae doesn't hide its powerful dead far away. It keeps them close, like a claim it wants to keep renewing. A breeze moves through, and a lamp flame flickers. Shadows ripple across the stones, making the circles seem to shift, to breathe. Your body reacts in that primal way, small tightness, then release. You steady your breath. You remember the wick you adjusted in the tomb. You remember how light is maintained. You step closer and shield the flame with your hand for a moment, until it steadies again. The shadows settle. The circles return to stillness. It's a tiny action, but it feels appropriate here. You are caring for light in the presence of darkness. That's what humans do. You move deeper into the area, and the sense of splendor grows, not because you see treasure, but because you feel the attention that treasure has drawn across time. These graves are magnets. In life, the rulers pulled resources toward them. In death, their graves pull curiosity, reverence, envy, and story. Even you, a sleepy visitor from another age, are drawn here by the idea of gold and power and the drama of ancient royalty. And yet, standing here, the gold feels secondary. The real thing you feel is grief shaped into ceremony. The way a community tries to make sense of loss by giving it objects. The way they try to keep the dead present by surrounding them with tools and ornaments, as if the afterlife requires equipment. The way they try to protect the dead from being forgotten by embedding them into the citadel's living architecture. You notice how the circles create a boundary not only in space but in emotion. Inside the circle, memory, weight, reverence. Outside, daily life, firewood, bread, records. The boundary is porous, because life and death are never fully separate, but it's still a boundary. A reminder. You find yourself thinking about the palace's storerooms again, how wealth is stored, counted, sealed. The golden hoards that will come into your story are not random glitter. They are the visible endpoint of systems, harvest turned into tribute, tribute turned into objects, objects turned into status, status turned into burial goods, burial goods turned into legend. Everything is connected, like the woven cloth you watched earlier. The gold is the bright thread, but the fabric is made of wool and labor and record-keeping and water and oil and maintenance. Without the quiet parts, the bright parts never exist. Your mind lingers on that thought, and it calms you. It makes the legend feel less like a fantasy and more like a human outcome. Humans build big stories from small repetitions. Humans turn daily survival into monuments. Humans turn death into display, not because they are shallow, but because they are trying to hold on to meaning when everything else slips away. A faint sound drifts up from the citadel, distant, softened by night. Not words. Just the suggestion of continued life. A footstep, a pot being set down, a fire crackling. The living world continues, even while you stand among the dead. That contrast is strangely soothing. It tells you the system holds. It tells you life doesn't shatter just because someone important dies. You turn slowly, letting your gaze move across the circles one last time. You don't cling to them. You don't dramatize your farewell. You simply acknowledge them, the way you acknowledge the offering dish, with quiet attention, with respect, with a sense that you are a guest in a story that doesn't belong to you. And as you begin to walk away, you feel the pull of the next and final layer, closer now, brighter in your imagination. The golden royal hoards aren't just rumors anymore. They are the shimmering edge of something you can almost touch, artifacts that will soon catch your lamplight, not as greed, but as the distilled glow of a whole citadel's life. You follow the path toward that glow, carrying the grave circle's quiet weight with you, so that when you finally meet the gold, you meet it with the right softness. With the knowledge that splendor is never only splendor. It is always also someone's labor, someone's fear, someone's love, someone's attempt to keep a name from fading. You keep walking, slow and steady, letting night hold you as you approach the treasure that history remembers, ready to see it not as loot, but as a final echo of Mycenae's human heart. You move toward the glow you've been carrying in your imagination all night, the idea of gold that isn't just metal, but meaning. The path is quieter now, as if even the stones are trying not to interrupt. Lamps hang low in careful hands. Their light pools on the ground like warm milk, then slides away as you walk. The air smells of earth and olive oil and that faint mineral coolness that seems to live permanently around old stone. You reach a place where the sense of hoard becomes real, not as a greedy pile, but as an arrangement, a collection, a deliberate gathering of objects that once belonged to lives with names and obligations. Maybe the objects are kept in a protected chamber for ritual viewing, or maybe you're standing at the edge of a burial space where the mind can see what the eyes cannot. In this dream, the exact logistics don't matter as much as the feeling. You are close to the distilled shine of Mycenae's royal story. The lamplight catches on gold, and the gold answers instantly, warm, bright, almost alive. Not the cold sparkle of modern jewelry under harsh lighting, but a deeper glow, as if the metal remembers fire. Thin sheets hammered into shape. Rounded beads that look like frozen drops of sun. Delicate ornaments that suggest patient hands, careful tools, hours of focused breath. You see gold that has been worked, not merely found. Gold that has been persuaded into meaning. Your eyes linger on a face-shaped mask, if not literally present, then present in the way famous objects haunt a place. You imagine hammered gold laid over a face, preserving the idea of a person's status long after the skin has vanished. The mask isn't a portrait in the modern sense. It's a declaration: this mattered. This was someone. This was a center. And your sleepy mind, now gentler than it was at the Lion Gate, doesn't leap to treasure. It leans toward attempt. The attempt to keep identity from dissolving. The attempt to make death less final by surrounding it with brilliance. You notice other pieces, small cups with patterned rims, gold foil pressed into simple designs, rings that would have warmed on fingers, pendants that once rested against throats. You imagine the weight of a necklace on a collarbone. The faint clink of beads against cloth. The way gold feels cool at first touch, then slowly warms as the body claims it. You imagine the person wearing it, not as a distant legend, but as a tired human who also needed water and bread and warmth and sleep. Because the gold here is not separate from the rest of the citadel's life. It is the bright tip of a long spear made of ordinary things. You think of the storerooms, grain and honey and oils sealed behind clay and cord. You think of the scribes, marks pressed into soft tablets, turning harvest into order. You think of the weavers, threads pulled taut, cloth built line by line. You think of the well, rope fraying where it rubbed, then wrapped, protected, kept functional. You think of the feast, herbs and salt and timing, and the tiny gust that almost spoiled the smoke. You think of the snap seal, the moment trust wavered, and how calmly it was restored with verification, repair, resealing. All of that leads here. The gold is not magic by itself. It is the visible result of a system that kept itself intact long enough to produce surplus, artistry, display. Gold is the loud part of a quiet machine. You let your gaze move slowly, because rushing would feel disrespectful, not to the gold, but to the effort inside it. Each piece seems to hold a miniature world, mines and trade routes, craftsmen and charcoal fires, hammered sheets and polished edges, rituals and burials and the human need to say, I was here. I mattered. Remember me. And you do remember. Not in a dramatic way, not with vows and speeches. You remember in the softer way that matters more at bedtime. You let the image settle into you without grabbing it. You allowed the gold to glow in your mind like a lamp, not like a prize. A quiet sadness touches the edges of the shine, because you can't hold a royal hoard without feeling its shadow. These objects were made to last beyond the body. They succeeded. But bodies still vanished. Voices still faded. The Wanax's shadow you felt earlier, the authority written in thresholds and polished columns, ended up here too, condensed into metal, sealed into memory. Your breath slows. The lamp flame flickers, and the gold seems to pulse, as if alive. It's only light moving, but it feels like a heartbeat. You stand very still and let yourself be small again, small in the presence of old power, small in the presence of time. Then, gently, you sense it. The night has reached its soft turning point. You've walked the threshold, touched the walls, breathed the courtyard smoke, hovered near palace order, tasted the idea of honey and oil, listened to styluses and clay, watched bronze and loom rhythms, cooled your throat at the well, felt the warmth of feast fires, steadied ritual smoke, helped a small disruption dissolve back into calm, stood at dusk over the plain, entered the beehive-tomb's listening dome, and circled the graves where splendor rests on grief. The citadel has given you its full arc. Now it's time to leave without clinging. You turn away from the gold, not because it loses beauty, but because you don't want it to become noise in your mind. You want it to remain aglow, something that warms rather than dazzles. You step back into the darker path, and the lamplight shifts from shining on metal to shining on stone again. The ground feels real under your feet. The air feels cooler on your cheeks. Your body remembers it is tired, and being tired is suddenly not a problem, it's the point. As you walk, you pass the edges of the grave circles again, their stones quiet and patient. You pass the beehive-tomb entrance, a dark mouth that no longer feels intimidating. It feels like a place that taught you how to listen. You pass the ridge where the plain once glowed, now mostly shadow, a few distant fires blinking like slow stars on earth. You pass the lion gate from the inside, and the headless lion bodies look softer in lamplight, less like warning and more like guardians of a dream. When you step beneath them, you feel the same threshold shift as before, but reversed. Inside to outside. Contained to open. The night air beyond the gate is cooler, wider, and it smells of grass and sky. The citadel behind you holds its lamps and its stories, continuing without you. That's the gentlest truth of history. It doesn't need you to keep going, but it can still change you while you pass through. You pause once, just beyond the gate, and place your palm lightly against the stone, one last touch. Warmth lingers in it. Not from fire, but from days stored in rock. You let that warmth press into your skin for a breath, then you let it go. You walk down the path into the dark hillside, moving slowly, letting the insects' chorus wrap around you like a soft blanket. The stars above seem a little brighter now that the citadel's lamps are behind you. Your mind holds Mycenaean fragments, the curve of a dome, the scent of olive oil, the hush of clay tablets, the glow of gold, and those fragments begin to loosen and drift, becoming less like facts and more like dream images. And that's exactly right. Because you didn't come here to memorize. You came here to be held, for a while, by old stone and older human effort. You came here to let your own busy mind be retuned to slower rhythms, the rhythm of making, storing, repairing, offering, remembering. The rhythm of a world that survives by paying attention. You keep walking until the lion gate is no longer visible, until the citadel becomes a dark shape against darker hills, and then even that shape fades into the night. What remains is the calm in your chest, the softened edges of your thoughts, the sense that even heavy stones can be arranged into something that holds. You breathe in. You breathe out. And you let Mycenae become part of your sleep. The path under you is gentler now, as if the earth has learned you're done carrying weight for tonight. Each step feels quieter than the one before, the sound of your movement dissolving into the soft chorus of insects and distant, harmless wind. The cool air rests on your face like a clean cloth, smoothing the last heat from your skin, smoothing the last sharp corners from your thoughts. In your mind, the lion gate becomes a simple shape, two silent guardians and a dark doorway, less a monument and more a lullaby. The cyclopean walls feel like a steady heartbeat. The storerooms become sealed jars of calm. The scribe's marks turn into tiny, harmless patterns that don't demand anything from you. The loom's rhythm returns as a slow, repeating comfort. The well's coolness becomes a small inner reservoir you can return to whenever you feel dry or drained. And the beehive-tomb, its echoing dome, changes too. It stops being a place of heaviness and becomes a place of softness, where every sound is rounded, returned, made gentle. Even the gold, that bright final glow, quiets itself in your memory. It becomes warm light rather than sharp shine, like a lamp left on low so you never have to be afraid of the dark. You don't need to hold on to every detail. You don't need to prove you remember. Your body is already taking what it needs: steadiness, warmth, slowness, the reassurance that small repairs can prevent big breaks. Let the images blur a little. Let the edges fade. Let the story settle into you the way oil settles in a clay cup, calm, patient, complete. Now let your breathing slow even more. In and out, as if the night itself is breathing with you. Feel your shoulders sink. Feel your jaw soften. Feel your thoughts drifting, lighter, farther apart, like stars you don't have to count. End of story. Sweet dreams.